I've known Lew for almost 40 years. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. Lew and I first met in Germany in 1969. When I went there for religious service, Lew was the very first person I met. And as you'll see, he has a wonderfully engaging personality, a great smile, and I have never forgotten the smile that I received from Lew Cramer when I first arrived in Hamburg, Germany in 1969. It stands out in my mind as one of the great memories of my youth. Lew started out his educational career at Stanford and then graduated from Brigham Young University, so he's wearing blue and white today.
Exactly.
It's Aggie blue and white. He stole our colors, you know that, folks. Lew got 2 degrees from BYU, a bachelor's degree and also his law degree, and has had an extensive career in international business, international government, and public service. For many years, he's lived in Washington, D.C. Lew, did you first go there as a White House Fellow? Was that what took you back there?
Right.
If you don't know what the White House Fellow program is, you ought to look it up on the web and learn about it. And some of you in this room could someday have the opportunity to serve as a White House Fellow. This was a program that was started, I believe, back in the Johnson administration. I think there are something like 30 White House Fellows a year, maybe less, I'm not sure.
15.
15.
Yeah.
And these are among the most outstanding young people in America, usually just at the beginning of their career. After they finish their terminal degree and maybe 2 or 3 years into their professional career, they'll take a sabbatical and serve as assistants to cabinet secretaries, to top policymakers in Washington. And Lew had the opportunity to serve as a White House Fellow, ultimately was asked to stay on, and ultimately served in very high and very significant positions in government. Served 5 different cabinet officers, served in the White House, worked in the West Wing of the White House for 2 different presidents, Reagan and Bush. Ultimately became the Director General of the U.S. Foreign and Commercial Service, responsible for 1,400 employees scattered around the world in 120 different embassies, 65 different offices in the United States. If you look at his bio, you can see the breadth and depth of experience that Governor Huntsman was wise to tap into when he asked Lew to move to Utah and to become president and CEO of the World Trade Center here in Salt Lake City. Lew has taught international business at Georgetown University and the University of Southern California. Maybe someday we'll get him to come up here and teach. Will you please join me in welcoming Lew Cramer?
Thanks, Doug. That was great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate it a lot. Thanks so much. Dean Anderson, thank you so much. Very gracious comments, and I'm delighted to be here. As I say, Dean Anderson has been one of my heroes for 40 years, and I'm sure for another 40 years we'll have that pleasure. I'm an Aggie through and through, despite these other degrees from some places down south, but the blue and white tie is definitely an Aggie tie. My father-in-law was the proud valedictorian of the class of 1941, and I thought it was the School of Commerce in those days.
It was, yeah.
School of Commerce. A fellow named John Welch, who's endowed scholarships and professorships and other things over the years. And I presume this microphone's working okay. Alrighty, let me just hook this up so it really works okay. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. And what a crowd. And to see the excitement among these young students is energizing to me. We know you're going to be paying our Social Security. We want you to succeed. We really want you to succeed. We want you to go forth from Logan to change the world. And that's a little bit what I'm going to talk about today. Our kids say, Dad, be good. We're going to be choosing your nursing home. Those kind of things keep me on my toes. And so I'm grateful for the chance to share this the time together in one of the most beautiful valleys in the world. Many of my ancestors are buried in Mendon, and my uncle has the Floyd Morgan Theater named after him, and we love Logan. It's an honor to be here. The Utah World Trade Center is not just for Salt Lake, it's for the entire state, and clearly a key part of that is Logan. I was asked to talk a bit about, the instructions came that you're supposed to show some of your background and your obstacles and what you've overcome in your life. And I just think, man, I've been so blessed. The obstacles were, you know, just minimal compared to the blessings that we stand before us. And I think that's one of the things we need to see as proud Aggies, as Cougars, whatever. The blessings we have and the tools we gain and the training we have, we need to share that with the rest of the world. And so I hope that we'll leave today thinking, you know, I need to do more, I'm committed to doing more, and I'm capable of doing more. There are lots of tough times going on right now. We say tough times never last, but tough people do. And Aggies certainly are going to, you're going to get your tough times early in your career. I was, you know, in my 30s before we had a few recessions and other things, and you're getting it out of your way early. So congratulations on that score. Victor Hugo, the great French poet, once said, "The future of any country depends on what its young people between the ages of 19 and 25 are thinking." And I think about that. I've got 6 kids, all in about that age grade, and you know, I think a lot about posterity. The founding fathers repeatedly talked about posterity. What are we doing to ensure that you will succeed as our posterity? You know, Dean Anderson really is much younger than I am, despite what he says. But, you know, we don't have a whole lot of time left, so we need to pass on some of these lessons we've learned in the hopes that, that it'll be a blessing to you. I have a son who's a physician, a doctor in Boston, and he works in the emergency room a lot, and he talks about this golden time, that when somebody comes in with gunshot wound or whatever it might be, a stroke, there's a golden time. You know, depending on the injury, it may be just be a few minutes, stroke maybe an hour or two, a heart attack. But this golden time is critical, that if action is not taken during that short interval, serious consequences can take place. And this is no surprise. You hear this from your parents and your friends. This is your golden time. You're making the decisions in the next 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 or 3 semesters, on career, job, spouse, all those kinds of things. The golden time is here. So I've been in enough of these. When I was your age, you're not going to remember anything I say, except that I have a feeling of urgency about what's required of you. This golden time is there. We are in a global economy, and today I'd like to talk about the fact that you may not all become global business execs. I hope many of you do. I hope many of you leave Utah and do some wonderful things, because it's a big world out there. But you may not all be going global, but you all need to be globally competitive. This is a world where globalization is like a tsunami sweeping across the landscape. Every one of you has read or will read, I'm sure, Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. Flat means waves sweep, tsunamis sweep across there pretty fast. There are no hills or valleys, not even Cache Valley, that you can hide from the challenges of globalization. So today I want to talk a little bit about why it's important that we prepare for this. And talking back to my own career, I spent 2 years in Germany with Dean Anderson and a lot of other good people. I love Europe as a result of that. I lived 3 years in Japan. I loved Asia. But most of us don't always realize that there's a big world out there. And let me just ask, how many of you have lived overseas for more than a couple months at a time in this audience? Fabulous. That's great. How many of you have a passport? Terrific. Dean Anderson, you're doing the right thing at this age. And I look around and see what Chris Fossen's doing, and one of my other favorite people on the planet is Dave Clark, that many of you don't know yet. You need to meet Dave Clark. Whatever Dean Anderson's paying him, it's not enough. He's doing it because he loves you, but he's the head of the Entrepreneur Center, and also Europhile as well. I was in the Reagan administration. We had a going away party for a CEO. He had 65 years old. He was retiring. I think Fortune 100 company. For his going away present, you know what we gave him? A passport. He had never had a passport. That was 25, 30 years ago. That would never happen today. We live in this global world where this, as I say, this tsunami is sweeping across. I graduated from law school at University down south thinking that I would be a West Coast litigator all my life. I went to work in Silicon Valley, great practice, interesting things happening. Then I moved down to Los Angeles for another opportunity with a really great law firm. But I thought I'd be a West Coast litigation attorney all my life. And I ended up spending most of my career as an East Coast international business executive. And how did this happen? And how's this going to happen in your lives? I mean, you do all the planning you can in your life, and then something comes along. I always loved international. I loved my time in Europe, loved my time in Japan. One Friday afternoon, it seems like it always happens on a Friday afternoon. It was a hot Los Angeles beautiful sunny summer day, Friday afternoon, and my fellow attorneys, most of them had tickets to the Dodgers, I think, that night, or they're going to go to the beach. And one of my partners came in and said, I've got an old fraternity buddy, his name's Hoyle Schweitzer. He's just got a patent on something. He takes his surfboard and he puts a sail on it. He calls it a windsurfer. We all said, well, that's strange, but maybe it'll work, you know. I mean, smart ideas are important. And my partner said, who's going to help me? He wants to license this in Europe. And I still remember the other guys going, I'm out of here. I got tickets to the Dodgers. And before I looked around, I was the last man standing. So I ended up being the guy that spent the weekend figuring out how to license a windsurfer, this cool thing, in Europe. And now, those of you who've been to Europe, you've seen windsurfers everywhere. It's a huge market. So after that long weekend, I became known as kind of the international guy. It wasn't a really large law firm, and so any international issue came up, they said, you know, Cramer, he does the international stuff. So it became interesting. Living in Los Angeles, international became more and more vibrant. And then we had the 1984 Olympic Games, and I was involved in recruiting foreign language hosts for that. And it just kind of built as an opportunity and became more and more interesting. And then when we moved to Washington, D.C., again, another late Friday afternoon. Remember this distinctly. Again, it's summertime, so be careful late Friday afternoons. The Secretary of Commerce sent a message out saying, Monday morning I need a report on my desk about the competitive ability of the United States against these other 10 economies. I need this. I have to report to President Reagan about this. And it was 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. In Washington, D.C. in the summer, you can shoot, you know, a cannon through a government office building. That's not a dangerous act. It is deserted. And so this assignment came down from the Secretary of Commerce, and I did not have the benefit of an economics training at the Utah State University. I was an English major. But he wanted economic analysis, and so I distinctly remember the three brains of international economics in the U.S. government were walking. They were always hanging out together, went to lunch together, did a lot of things together. They were career guys, and they were walking by me just as the assignment came through, and I said, Jeff, great opportunity. The Secretary of Commerce wants this report for the President from Monday morning about... He looked at me and said, Cramer, you've got a personal problem. We're out of here. So that entire weekend, I became an economics specialist on the 10 competitive economies the Secretary of Commerce wanted to know about. Turned in the report. He apparently liked it enough that when an opportunity came along to have this position as the Director General of the Commercial Service of the United States, which is one of the all-time great jobs in the U.S. government, the Secretary Verdi said, you know, that Cramer guy, he seems to get this stuff. Not that I did, but he liked me, and that was the beginning of an interesting opportunity to do things that otherwise never happened. So when they say, when preparation meets opportunity, some good things can happen. So Friday afternoons, stick around. If the boss sends you something to do your best, and maybe some good things will happen. Well, how many of you here plan on or would like to work overseas sometime in your career? That is superb. Believe it or not, every so often I have to show up at the University of Utah campus, and I've asked this in classes there, and usually there's only a class most of the classes are about a third this size. We only get 3 or 4 hands up. That's exciting. We want to see that happen. We want to do whatever we can, whether it's as a university, as a World Trade Center, as Governor Huntsman's administration, to encourage you to look at international opportunities. Utah is a great place, a wonderful place to raise your family, but you don't, this may be against the rules of the Utah State Board of Regents, but you don't have to do that here. And having experiences as our family did for over 20 years in Washington, D.C., you come back with a great deal of appreciation and expertise and blessings and contributions you can make to the state. So don't feel like if you graduate from Logan, you have to stay in Logan, because there's a lot more opportunities out there. If you want to stay in Logan, we'll try and make opportunities here for you internationally as well, but don't feel like this is the only place that'll happen. One of the challenges that we have in this state is that we have people who believe, of course, that because maybe for, social, charitable, whatever reasons, they've spent time overseas, and therefore they're experts on wherever they were. I know lots of my friends went to Korea, and they're experts in speaking Korean about religious issues, but if you do a business deal, they're at sea. But if they were to take just one more class in business Korean, or one other class that would prepare them to be competitive in that Korean, with that Korean language, they have a huge advantage with the rest of the world. So I urge you, if you've had international language experiences, build on that. Our governor is the most international governor in the world, except in this country, except for Arnold Schwarzenegger, the best known for other reasons. Governor Huntsman, as you know, as you may not know, but you should appreciate, since this university is named after his family. I noticed it's John M. Huntsman. It doesn't say junior or otherwise, but just a quick diversion. When Dean Anderson and I were admitted to Stanford, they give you a note that says, a fake diploma for 4 years from now. And it says Leland Stanford Junior University, because it was named after the son who died at an early age at Stanford. And I remember friends of mine getting that Leland Stanford Junior University and just saying, what have I done? I've signed up for a junior college. Well, this is not the junior business school because it's John M. Huntsman Senior or Junior, but let me just applaud what Governor Huntsman is doing to internationalize this state. He was an LDS missionary for 2 years in Taiwan and then lived there 3 years as a business executive for the Huntsman Chemical Company. Then was the U.S. ambassador to Singapore, and he has an adopted daughter from India and an adopted daughter from China. His Mandarin, by all accounts, is superlative. I can't evaluate that, but when we did a trade mission last year to China, we were in the Great Hall of the People with the senior leaders of China because of his reputation as the former trade ambassador to Asia. The translator started translating for him, and he told a joke in Chinese, and the Chinese just broke up in laughter as only they can with an American actually speaking Mandarin to them. And the Mandarin translator looked at our group and said, he speaks better Mandarin than I do. You don't need me. So that's the kind of talent that is so wonderful to have in this state, in the leadership of this state. Governor Huntsman's pushed hard for language training. Okay, how many of you speak another language besides English? Fabulous. Fabulous. There's probably no other audience in America you can get that kind of response from. In this state, this year, 73 schools, high school and middle schools, are beginning teaching Mandarin Chinese. Almost 7,000 students, more than any other state in the Union, more than California. You'd assume that they'd be teaching Mandarin Chinese there. And that's because our governors pushed that as a skill for the 21st century. And Russian and Arabic and other languages aren't far behind. In fact, the governor and I have this running joke because he knows that I love Europe and speak German and other things, and he'll say, Cramer, you're so Cold War. You're the last century. It's all about Europe, baby. So I wore, the first day of work as the World Trade Center, I wore a tie that had the European Union flags on it. And most governors, wouldn't even know that those were flags of anything other than maybe, NASCAR racers or something. Governor Huntsman looked at that instantly and said, that's EU flags. That's Cold War, Cramer. We're all about Asia in this operation. So the governor is committed to this happening. And it's exciting to be part of what he's doing. I have this job. I really had no interest in leaving Washington, D.C. It's a great place to live, wonderful place to raise children. Languages, to graduate from high school in Virginia, have to have 3 years of one language or 2 years of 2 languages as a minimum. Wonderful schools there, terrific place to live. But I had the smart career move 25 years ago of hiring Governor Huntsman to work for me when I was the Director General. Governor worked for me, and we've kept in touch ever since. In fact, somebody said, how did you get this job? And I said, real smart career advice. Always hire a brilliant future governor, and your career is guaranteed. But Governor Huntsman said, we're going to change the dynamics in this state. We're going to let people know that Utah is open for business, particularly international business. A World Trade Center, which we now have in Utah, is one of 350 of worldwide networks of trade centers. There are about 50 in the United States. There is none active between Denver and the Pacific Coast. Mostly they're in the coast. And of course the most famous one was the one that was bombed in that tragedy of September 11th, the World Trade Center, because it was the emblem of the power, might, and economic strength of the United States. So World Trade Centers are a validation or a catalyst or a pathfinder that international business is happening in a state or a region. I just came back last week from being in Dubai. We can talk a lot about Dubai, which is another incredible place on this planet. But we had an international congress of the 350 World Trade Centers around the world. Dubai, the World Trade Center, is 50 stories high. They have a $2 billion exhibition hall, and they are open for business. They're building the world's largest airport nearby, near one of the largest ports in the world, as well as the tallest building, 220 stories, in Dubai. And it's all built around international trade, world trade. So as you look at your career opportunities, as you're planning your curriculum going forward, realize that you're part of this world. I love going internationally, except for the jet lag. My wife, you know, the iron overcoat, when you come back, it grips you. But we were talking about the trips that Utah State had made recently. 11 days, 9 days red eyes, Manchester, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bangalore. That is real combat duty. People say international business, oh, you know, they think it's the summer in the south of France. I had this missing phone is now going off. We can determine whose phone this is. Hello, who would you like to be talking to? Who do you want to talk to? Hello, your phone is missing. Is there somebody you'd like to talk to we could give your phone back to? Yeah, who are you calling? I'm sorry, Rob Dunn? Zachary Dunn, here's your phone. You know, Zachary's not here right now, but if you'll call back in a few minutes, we can certainly ensure that Zachary gets his phone call, Allison. Thank you. He's lost his phone, so keep trying. Yeah, we're in class, but you're more than welcome to come join us. Thanks. Well, Allison knows that Zachary doesn't have a phone. Okay. At least it wasn't a call from Dubai, but it could have been in today's world. I taught at Georgetown 15 years ago when cell phones were just starting, and I made my career in international telecom. And I would bring in this big heavy brick and show the class, and it was phenomenal for them to see. It was a miracle 15 years ago that you could call, and and a lot of international students, we'd call all over the world. And today it's, you know, Allison calls Zach, and, you know, nobody thinks anything of it. Well, I have just want to repeat one thing about the international world. There are in the state, for example, the state legislators are big supporters of the World Trade Center. But when I urge the state legislators to go take trips to go see what's happening internationally, they say, you know, if I do that, my voters will think, my constituents will think I'm not doing the work here. And my response, parochial that may be, is, if you're not going overseas at least once a year and seeing the competition that's out there, you're not doing your job as a legislator in this state for the citizens of the great state of Utah. Because the governor, for example, he has focuses on focuses. I'm in an academic setting, got to be precise here. He's looking at 4 countries in particular for international expansion. Mexico and Canada, which are naturals, and then India and China, because of the 3 billion new consumers that have come online in the last 10 years in those 2 countries. So he's led trade missions to each of those places. It is an honor to go with a man as, again, the best known governor in this world besides Arnold Schwarzenegger, because we were in India last year with the governor giving us all kinds of background. I mean, it was really an amazing tour de force to see his academic preparation for those kinds of environments. He does have an Indian daughter that he's adopted, and that helps, I'm sure. But we were with at the U.S. Embassy in Delhi, and a commercial officer came up to me that I'd known for a long time, and he said, I just want to tell you one thing. Governor Huntsman is the 17th governor that's come through India this year. India's, you know, obviously lots happening, very popular. 17th governor that's come through Delhi this year. He's the smartest, the most articulate, the best prepared, hardest working. And the last governor that came through didn't know the difference between India and Indiana. And here's Governor Huntsman talking about the 6th century Sikh migration from, you know, Kashmir. It's a really an amazing commitment by the top leader of our state to ensure that we become an internationalized state. Although we were in the middle of nowhere in the back of a bus, it was hot and dusty, and it was a long day in India. And one of the guys, the dean of the business school, on the business school faculty at the University of Utah, turned to me and said, I just wish the governor had adopted a daughter from Switzerland instead of India. So there are challenges. It's not always easy being out there, but it is certainly worth it. And the numbers are astounding. When we did a trade mission to China as well. I mentioned where the governor asked the translator asked not to have to do any work. But we're meeting people who are willing to work 27 hours a day to compete with us for our jobs. You know, this is hardworking, talented, smart individuals. You drive from Shanghai to to the airport, from the Shanghai airport to downtown. You're going through miles and miles of brand new factories that are built only to compete with us. James McGregor, who wrote the book about 3 billion new consumers, said, if Americans want to continue to drive their kids to tennis lessons and ballet lessons in a Hummer, then they better plan on being smarter than the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is working harder and longer than we are. So we do have to be smarter about this. And that's one of the things I note, that we think we're smarter about some things, but you look at the international tests, you know, it's frustrating. When I was in the Reagan administration, we had one where they ranked 17 countries on the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM skills. Out of 17 countries, the United States was 4th in 4th grade. And you've heard these stories. There's a lot of these, but this was 4th in 4th grade, 8th in 8th grade. And by 12th grade, we were 17th, dead last out of 17 on those skills. Actually, we were tied for 17th, because I can remember this. We were tied with the Philippines. And I was telling this to a Filipino friend of mine, and he said, no way are we Filipinos as dumb as you Americans. But we have to be working harder, because, you know, if they're going to work 27 hours a day, the only compensating thing is the French. They want to work 27 hours, you know, a week and then head to the beach and, you know, eat their croissants. But that's not who we're competing with. When we talk to the Chinese leaders with the governor, we just talked greater political things. We said, you know, what's the status with Taiwan and these military things? Political leaders said, you know, let's get one thing straight. The number one thing driving us, our policy, everything we're doing in China, is the fact we have to create in China 1 million new jobs a month. 1 million new jobs a month to keep ahead of this, you know, this tiger with the population that's out there. You know, we're happy in Utah if we create, you know, 20,000 jobs a month. There's 1 million new jobs a month to keep ahead. So everything else is subservient to that goal in this country. And how do they do that? They want to create these export factories. They want to do other things. We'd rather they did internal consumption, other things. But that's what's driving them in China. And so these jobs are going to be competing with us. Well, another theme that comes repeatedly is, if it can be digitized, it can be outsourced. 10% of the jobs in America are probably at risk of being outsourced. If it can be digitized, I have a nephew, a very bright nephew. He's a radiologist in Indianapolis. He comes into work, reads X-rays. You know, radiologists look at, you know, the pathology of an X-ray, and he reads those for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. When he goes home, that continued output from that hospital in Indianapolis is put on a T1 telecom line and sent to India. And radiologists in India, at 10% of probably what he makes, are reading those same charts all night long, and then he picks it up back in the morning when he comes. But because it can be digitized, my nephew says, I better get some additional skills. I better be a little higher on that technology curve. And so he's going back and getting a graduate fellowship at Duke University at the med school there, because he knows, particularly in his business, if it can be digitized, it will be outsourced. What can't be digitized? You know, cleaning the classroom, flipping the hamburgers. Those kind of jobs are safe, but those aren't the jobs we're looking for. Well, whether we like it or not, we're an international business. I tell our colleagues, the business execs that I see around the state all the time, you may not think you're competing with the people in Taiwan or Singapore, but they sure want to compete here. This is still the largest market on the planet. They want to be in Salt Lake City, even if you don't want to be in Taiwan. And even if, as I said earlier, if you don't want to go global, you still have to become globally competitive. You have to be prepared to compete with these people who can, with a touch of the internet, can be competing with you around the world. And it's happening. It's exciting to see this. Our job at the World Trade Center is we're a nonprofit organization. We're here to help put profits in the pockets of the business execs in Utah. We say, you know, thinking of dollars and cents, international business makes good business sense and lots of business dollars. Couple quick examples. We had a fellow called me recently from Davis County, big manufacturer, but all domestic. He'd gotten a call from the Mideast saying, we want a $2 million overhead crane order from you. They'd seen him on the internet. It looked like a terrific opportunity. But he called me and said, how am I going to get paid? You know, that's basically the number one question in international trade. How am I going to get paid? And I said, well, have you heard of a letter of credit? He'd never heard of a letter of credit. And I said, well, you've got bankers. We have some really smart bankers in this state. Who's your banker? It was Zions Bank. Well, here's the name of the senior VP for international. He can take care of you. That company now has a $2 million order that would never have happened without the internet and good bankers and some connections that make things happen. Another call the other day from Delta, Utah. You all know where Delta is, right? The thriving metropolis of Delta. How many are from Millard County here? All right. That's right. Well, my mom's a hatch from Scipio, and so the governor always gives me a bad time because his family's the Huntsman's from Fillmore. So they're a much higher social strata than Scipio. Well, Delta's somewhere in between, I'm sure, between Scipio and Delta. Scipio and Fillmore. In Delta, there's a Red Rock cheese, a couple years old. Goats, they do goat cheese. They got an order for 80,000 pounds of goat cheese a month to go to Korea. You know, Asians, by and large, aren't real fans of milk products. There's some issues about that. But pizza is becoming a big deal. Goat cheese, mozzarella, perfect for the pizzas in Korea. Somehow, through the miracle of the internet, they now have this opportunity, 80,000 pounds. Again, the same questions, how do I get paid? And in their case, how do I ship this somehow so that it lasts, you know, across a 22-day ocean voyage to Korea? And those are the kinds of things that we can help them with. And now, we say it's like, you know, your first kiss. Once you try it, there's more to come, right? There's a bright future. And once you do international business, you know, and you learn how to do a letter of credit, and you realize the profit margins are terrific, you're willing to do it again. When we say with $1 today, you can make more of a shipment from Delta to Dusseldorf than from Delta to Denver. Because of the margin. You know, we've got an automatic cost advantage of 15, 20, 30% against our competitors now. Let's take advantage of that. I have companies that come into me and say, don't tell them how good things are with international business because we're doing great in China. Tell them it's terrible. Because we want our own little, you know, monopoly to take place. There's another company in West Salt Lake called Martin Doors. They do garage doors. Can you imagine anything harder to ship internationally than garage doors? I mean, big garage doors and containers and all. Maybe goat cheese, but garage doors are tough. They are in 84 international markets, shipping garage doors from Utah. Cost advantages, I mean, China's got to be a low-cost producer. So we had to see this. We went out and took a tour. I urge anybody that wants to see how manufacturing can be done right in this state to go to Martin Doors. You could eat off the floor of the factory. They have modern techniques. I said, how do you compete against the Chinese? It's certainly not in price. I said, no, we're smarter, more innovative, flexible, and responsive than the Chinese. That's a good competitive advantage. I said, you're in 84 countries. What's your best country? Where are you growing the fastest? He said, well, with where the dollar is today, we have 84 new best countries as markets. And he said, Lew, I'd love to continue this conversation, but I've got to catch the next plane to Abu Dhabi. I've got opportunities selling there. So when he got back from Abu Dhabi, I said, how did it go? He said, fabulous. In fact, when I was in Dubai last week and in Abu Dhabi, I saw garage doors that had to be Martin garage doors everywhere in Abu Dhabi. I mean, keep the sand out. I mean, it's natural. They have Martin Doors, West Salt Lake City, Utah, has the northernmost doors in the world in Norway and the southernmost in Chile and everywhere in between. Over and over and over again, there's those kinds of opportunities. Well, I brought 3 visual aids. And one of them is a cell phone, but I didn't even have to bring my cell phone because Zachary took care of that. Cell phone is, I made my living for many years putting cell phones into about 30 countries around the world with US West International. Terrific opportunity. This was in the early 1990s, again, when everything was a brick. We went to the Eastern Bloc in particular. We were the first cell phones systems in Russia, Hungary, Czech, Slovakia, Poland. You know, wherever it was ugly, we were there putting cell phones in. Because in those days, you know, Montana wasn't growing real fast. We were the monopoly company. It's now the successor company is Quest, which is another long story. But US West was the monopoly provider in 14 western states. But as again, Wyoming and Montana wasn't growing very fast. So we said, you know, 1990, the wall had fallen. Let's go over and see what we can do overseas. Where we were not the monopolist. In fact, we were fighting against the entrenched monopolist. We were the new entrant. Some incredible stories came out of that. Many of them not just phone related or business related, but our motto was, when people talk, dictators walk. You probably remember, you don't remember because you're not old enough, for most of you remember when the wall came down. But Dean Anderson and I know that wall pretty well from one side of it, not the other. The USSR had about 96% penetration of televisions. Why was that? because television is a one-way medium. You know, Uncle Joe Stalin can get up there, say anything he wants. You can yell all you want at the television, and he's not going to hear you. But Stalin also said the most destabilizing force of revolution is a telephone. Because it's a two-way medium. You can say, hey, time for, you know, a revolution. Meet you at 3 o'clock at Red Square. You know, and so the penetration of phones was about 1% in Russia. When we put in the first cell phone systems there, this was, you know, post-wall falling down, so there was an intent for democracy and all. We went and they also said, you know enough about cell phones. Can you increase the long-distance capacity in this country? And we said, how many long-distance phone calls can you take in the entire USSR? You know, which is now, I don't know what, 22 countries now. They said, we have 72 lines. We can have 72 long-distance calls at once in this entire country. I mean, again, they wanted to keep that democratic medium out. Well, we said, well, you know, why don't we look at your phone book and just see how we can work this out together? And they said, well, we only have one phone book. And we said, well, we understand, you know, one from Moscow. Whatever. No, we have one phone book. The KGB owns the one phone book. And that was kind of the environment we went into. But by putting, and this is a longer story, this is a great story about some of the things we did in Hungary and other places to put cell phones in. With the benefit of the information that a cell phone brings, the world has shifted because people have come closer together. I mean, those of you who are my age cannot even, you know, comprehend what it is like today because of the exchanges. And I use the cell phone as a symbol of this because you're living in that kind of world. Eventually, the most important distance in international business is the last 3 feet, where you get together, talk, meet, greet, and build those connections. But in between, we have to use other ways to connect. There are now more cell phones in Manhattan than there are in entire sub-Saharan Africa. There's lots of opportunities to continue to grow in the developing world. My second prop was the Economist Magazine. When I started in business, I was reminded of the motto of the United States Air Force Academy. A big, you know, eagle out in front of the Colorado Springs says, man's flight through life is powered by the strength of his knowledge. Man and woman's flight through life is powered by the strength of his knowledge. And it's what you read. I began working for US West and I said, what does the boss read? And they say, your boss always reads The Economist. I think The Economist is the best news and economic and business magazine in the English language. Just as an example, there are a lot of others, but The Economist is a symbol of, are you preparing yourself for the future competition that's out there? I was really interested about a month and a half ago, a Korean company came in and they said, we'd like to open up a manufacturing plant in Utah. But our Korean officials, officers who would come, are a little nervous that they may not have the right schools or training or rigorous enough education for their kids. And one of the people in the circle said, well, I want you to know that Davis County has the highest high school graduation rate in the country, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know if that's true, but they believed it was. The Korean gentleman looked at them and said, you know, in Korea we don't even keep that statistic. If you don't graduate from high school, you might as well kill yourself. You know? So that's the kind of level. And you know, the Koreans call the Japanese the lazy Asians. I mean, there is a real drive out there, and education is how we're going to succeed. And I use this Economist as a prop to remind you continual learning is required if we're going to be competitive in this kind of world. I do know that we can do better in this state. My son back in Boston says the ultimate prestige in the Boston neighborhood where he lives is, you know, you have a dusty old Volkswagen station wagon, but you have a Cornell Law School or Kennedy School at Harvard or whatever. That's the real prestige. And here my son comes out to Utah and he goes, everybody, all they want is a big pickup. That's all they want here. As compared, where are we putting our priorities? Now, I drove through the parking lot. There's a lot of chrome out there in the parking lot. I'm a little nervous about the consumer debt, but that's another note. That's another talk. Okay, we talked about learning languages. We talked about thinking. We didn't talk enough about thinking long term. I was with the Chinese ambassador in Washington, D.C. in 1999. We kind of had as the new millennium kind of event together, and I was talking with him, and I said, what are you looking at for the next next year, the year 2000 coming? He said, we don't really look at the next year. We look at the next millennium. The last millennium wasn't that good for the Chinese, but the next millennium is looking really good. So that's long term. Well, the other thing is the 10% rule. I always was told that, you know, if you work 10% harder or longer or smarter, you had a huge advantage. Whether that's, you know, if it's a 40-hour week, another 4 hours will do it. Dick Marriott Hotels likes to say what his dad always told him: nobody gets rich on 40 hours a week. You need to put that extra 10% in, whether it's studying on Saturday, getting your notes together, whatever, but it's ensuring, again, I apologize for the sound, ensuring that you're 10% better than the competition. Well, time is a-fleeing. I have one final prop, and that's a package of gum. I lived in Washington, D.C. In an area called McLean, and the neighborhood was called Langley, which is the home of the CIA. So we didn't live too far. My wife said, "This is great. My husband works at the White House. That's where the first bomb's going to go off. And I live at the CIA headquarters. That's where the second bomb goes off." Well, somehow we survived both of those, but we had a lot of friends who worked in the CIA. And this gum package is emblematic of the final test that they would give for some of their young new employees. They would ask them lots of things, test them on their languages, all their kinds of regular skills. And they just said, kind of as a throwaway question, but it really was intended to be much deeper probing. They said, you know, if you go to the grocery store and you buy $50 worth of groceries and there's accidentally a $1 pack of gum left in your grocery bag when you get home, what do you do with the pack of gum? And the answers, of course, varied. You know, oh, $1, heck, I probably, you know, next time I go, I'll pay them back. Or, you know, it's only $1. You know, those are all the wrong answers because it was an ethics question. It was, what are you going to do with something that's not yours? It was not your gum at the end of the day. It was not your gum, and people who flunked that part of the you know, viewed as a casual throwaway question, flunked the entire employment question. So I know that's one of the themes that Dean Anderson and the Huntsman School is focusing on, is ethics. You only have your good name and reputation at the end of the day. I had endless briefings when I worked for U.S. West International about the quickest way to get fired from that company was to violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA. And I'm sure you've talked about that, which is you cannot pay a bribe or other gratuity to a foreign official to do something in his official course of his duties. That was always a problem in the telecom world because we were dealing always with government officials. But if you once said yes to a bribe request, you always had to say yes. But if you always said no, and sometimes you had to say no 50 times, they knew where you stand, where you stood. And it was a powerful differentiator between most American companies and our competition. I still remember a deal that we lost in the Czech Republic because our European competitor, when the deal was to be signed, drove into the office of the government official. 5 of them had driven BMWs over from Europe, and they took their BMW keys, threw it on the desk, and took the train home, and they won the deal. We didn't. That was the way it was, and they've now had to pay the price down the road as that's come out. Another one quick story, living near Langley. In the early 1980s, there was a hijacking of a plane in Eastern Europe. And it was skipping around. This was before the days where we knew how to handle these things, and we didn't have really good communication. So at Langley, at CIA headquarters, they set up a phone system where the 17 countries could, in fact, ensure that they were keeping in touch with each other as this plane was hopscotching across the European continent. And this phone system was, you know, primitive. It was advanced for the time, primitive what we'd view today. But in the middle of this entire tracking of this hijacked plane, somehow a crossed phone line, which could happen in the olden days before digital came in. And it was, again, a Friday afternoon. You know, we warned you about Friday afternoons. It was a French man calling a French woman and saying, "Let's get away for this weekend." And the French woman said, "My husband's out of town. I'm married. I shouldn't do this." And the guy on the other line, the French guy, with 17 countries listening in, said, "Don't worry. Nobody will ever know." Well, people will know. People will know. We could talk a lot more. I know many of you got to get to class. It's an honor to be here with you. Ronald Reagan used to say to us, if we want to get anything done, if you don't care who gets the credit, you can get a lot more done. But he would say, it's easy to make a living, but it's hard to make a difference. And that's our responsibility here. You are being blessed with a tremendous education, with wonderful experiences, with friends that you'll know for the next 40 or 50 or 60 years, as Dean Anderson and myself. But these are things that will make a difference in your life going forward. We have Peter Drucker, you know, he was the one who, when I was talking about that CEO with the passport, you know, for his going away party, he said in the future there are going to be only two kinds of CEOs, those who are international and those who are unemployed. Drucker was right about that because you are going to face a world where those are your choices. I also liked another comment of Drucker that put up above the desk, which is the best way to predict the future is to create it. It's in your hands this golden time. You can create it. You've been blessed with the talent, skills, contacts, and training to do that. And I really wish you will because, as Ronald Reagan said, if not now, when? If not us, who? Thanks very much and go Aggies.